we will be like discussing a number of things, the leftovers in your course, of course. So I will be starting with a tool that is a very powerful tool in evaluation of training. That is the SWOT analysis. You might have used it elsewhere too. Actually, it is a very versatile tool. So you can use it just not just for your evaluations, but also at other places. So it is important to learn that tool also. And then we will discuss the training audit. And I have something called stakeholder analysis in my mind. That is another tool which can be used extensively by evaluators. And then, if time permits, then we will do how to develop an evaluation of training system and EOT report. Hmm. So that is my agenda for today. And just bear with me. It would be good if we can keep the discussions and questions for the last, at the end of the session. So that would be very helpful. And because we need to cover a lot. So I'm just sharing my screen with you, and you will be able to see. So I hope you are able to see what is there on the screen. So we are going to do today the SWOT analysis and training audit. Actually, you have already learned a number of models. And training audit is not a model, but it is an approach. Like you can customize your audit according to the training that you are conducting. So we will learn these two things. So let us start with SWOT analysis. SWOT stands for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. So, SWOT analysis is actually listing out the strengths in a program, the weaknesses, what opportunities exist, and what threats are there. Opportunities, we mean like what are other things that the training might bring in, or what are the other things that would be helpful in training. And threats is like if we do this training, then could it be like some problems may also come in future. So actually opportunities and threats are actually for this future thing, and strengths and weaknesses are actually the existing things. So strengths, now when you analyze the strengths, what are the strengths of a training institute or function? So it's not just the training program, it could be the training institution also. For example, they have in-house faculty who are on their salaries, so that is a very reliable kind of thing. So that could be one strength. The training faculty are very like renowned, or they have been trained very well. That can be a strength. And probably the training institution is of international repute. So these are the things that can be uh, strengths of any training institute. And even for function, it is widely used, or the certification can be used all over the country or all over the world if the training is done. So that becomes a strength. So what are the strengths of a training institute or function, or of a particular training strategy that is or could be used? What are trainers or other contributing to the institute or function proud of? What evidence is there that existing training has pleased client organization, trainees, and funding agencies? What is the potential to improve either the effective or efficient use of available resources? So these are the questions, basic questions that you would ask if you are listing down the strengths and weaknesses. Where is a training institute or particular training function weak? What are the weaknesses of an organization's training function? In the opinion of trainers, training administrators, stakeholders, and trainees at all levels, from senior officials to lower cadre workers, and from customers and beneficiaries. So where are the deficiencies? So you can very well guess that we make a list of deficiencies or things that are missing or things that make it not so popular or a little weak. These are the things that we list down in weaknesses. Opportunities are in what sort of ways can training and development generally, or training institutions or organizational training functions take advantage of opportunities created by technological changes or government initiatives. Then threats could be what changes to technology or government policies are likely to be dangerous to the existing strategies and resources being used to provide training in the public sector. Are expectations or demands likely to present threats, especially to training institutions or the roles and responsibilities of trainers? So, these are the things that need to be seen. So, we make a chart, we list down the threats, the strengths, the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Hmm? So, based upon these lists, we need to decide. We decide whether strengths are more than the weaknesses and whether more opportunities are going to open rather than inviting threats to the training program or to the organization itself. Hmm? So based upon this analysis we decide whether to take a training program or not, or how to analyze the training. So SWOT analysis can be done on this. For example, you list down the issue, the creation of own distributor company to access new and user sectors which are not currently being developed. So here you can list down the strengths. The strengths, for example, could be end user sales control and direction. This is good in the company. They have the right products, their quality is good, they have reliable products, superior product performance versus the competitors, and so on. There are many things, like there could be any number of things which come into the strengths. This is just an example. They have very long customer lists, very good. They have direct delivery capability and product innovations ongoing, can serve from existing sites. But in opportunities, it could be like they could develop new products. Opportunities are mostly futuristic, like if this is taken, then what is likely to be a benefit out of it? Local competitors have poor products. You will have this opportunity if you go in for creation of own distributor company. Hmm? Profit margins will be good, and users respond to new ideas, could extend to overseas. They are thinking of diversification also. Maybe they can have more products, and new specialist applications can surprise competitors, support core business economies, could seek better supplier needs. So these are the things like which fall into the category of opportunities. Then weaknesses versus threats. The issue is the same, creation of own distributor company to access new end user sectors. So the weaknesses could be customer lists are not tested. They do have big lists, but they are not tested. Some gaps in range of for certain sectors. They are a small player in the large sea of competitors. No direct marketing experience is available in the company. Need more salespeople. They have a limited budget. No pilot or trial done has been done yet. Don't have detailed plan yet. Delivery staff need training, and so on. So you can just see, go through the list, see what could be the weaknesses in this issue. And the threats, mostly are seen through the strengths only, and threats are seen through the weaknesses only. If they're not taken care of, the weaknesses, they may become a threat. So legislation could impact. Environmental effects would favor larger competitors. Existing core business distribution risk. Market demand very seasonal. Retention of key staff critical. It could be possible that the product would be selling only in winters, not uh, in summers. Retention of key staff critical, and people may leave the company, and with the experience they may go out. They join other companies at a higher pay. Whatever experience you create, whatever trainings you give, they may leave the company. They could distract from core businesses. That is a possibility. So, possible negative publicity and vulnerable to reactive attack by major competitors. So, you can see that there's a thin line between weaknesses and threats, as between strengths and opportunities. So, let us go on to the next topic that I wanted to discuss with you today was training audit. Now, why do we do training audit? You must have understood anything audit is the post training. So, whatever is done after the training. So, audit is actually after a thing has happened, we do the audit. Its purpose is to identify the strengths and weaknesses of the training or learning function in terms of its current responsibilities and future commitments. Since every organization is unique, each training audit is customized to meet the specific learning needs and requirements of each situation. An organization could be small, so you will customize the training audit according to that. If it is a larger organization, maybe you will have to do it in spells. Uh, you can categorize your training programs and do it on similar training programs as a one go. Now, why should we conduct training audit? The first and foremost thing is to ensure that training programs are meeting our organizational goals. Then we guarantee that training programs are complying with the industry standards. Nowadays, the certifications, ISO certifications are also important. So we must be complying with the industry standards. Discover important gaps in your training programs and gain insight into your learners' preferences, which kind of courses are preferred by people. Hmm? So that can be gained, and determine the overall effectiveness of your training program, whether performance has increased or not. Huh? That is what you gauge. So there could be some deficiencies in learning programs which can be identified by doing the training audit, and learning programs can be deficient for a number of reasons. Now, the purpose of the audit is to list out those reasons. And some reasons are given below, like decision making stakeholders request poor learning design methods. For example, some subject would be better taught by a movie, but the stakeholders, decision makers say the movie will cost too much. We won't ask you to make a movie. You can just perform, give lecture and give some reading material. Hmm? Resources are not available to produce more effective designs. You don't have the material available, you don't have the experts available in that area. Hmm? Project timelines do not enable more effective designs. Sometimes we give unrealistic deadlines. So whatever is available, people make from that only, and we don't get effective designs. Learning designers are unaware of better learning methods. So they don't know. They have not kept abreast of the latest. Learning designers are blind to opportunities for improvement. They don't see, actually, they love their creation and they don't see that there could be any improvement in that. Legacy designs compel reuse of poor learning methods. Something which has been used earlier and it was not good, that may be used again because the design compels that. Poor needs assessment skew content to wrong topics. If the needs assessment was not done properly, then you are likely to go to the wrong topics, teach the wrong things. So there could be poor media choices also. and they will limit motivation. For example, lecture might become very boring for the learners, and learning impact can be affected by that. Huh? So, adherence to rigid instructional design rules also hurts learning. Like, for example, this is supposed to be done as per the material given in the course, and the trainer uses only that instructional design. He doesn't use his imagination, and he does not suit the program to the needs of the participants. It is quite possible that the participants are mature enough and they already know that thing. So there's no point in repeating that. Hmm? So that hurts learning. By doing a training audit, deficiencies will be uncovered that can be targeted for improvement. So you can list out the deficiencies and you can target it for improvement. And sometimes improvements can be made by learning design team itself. They can make improvements in the training, and they can improve the design also. Other times, the learning audit gives us the ammunition to convince stakeholders of the possibility and importance of making learning design improvements. So, by listing out these deficiencies, the design team can also make it better, and even you can convince the stakeholders that training audit has given us these things, and these are the deficiencies, and we can counter them by improving in the design. So that is what is to be gained from it. Now, the thing is, how do we go about it? How do we conduct a training program? So it could be done actually by using all the training programs. So you need to catalog your training programs. You should list them out, see the duration, write down the durations, the level of participants, the target participants, who will be the target, how many days, what all contents, etc. does it have. So you should have a sort of a chart of that. Hmm? So we must catalog our training programs and take the details that are very important to be used while doing the training audit. Then analyze learner data and feedback. Learner data is before the training also. It really pays if you have some data even before the training starts. So keep your learner data ready, and also during the training and after the training. So feedback from the learners, and the audit should not be done based upon just one program's feedback. It is actually much better if you have a number of courses or a number of training programs that have gone, and you've collected the data from that, and you have taken the feedback. So the feedback will show you the points or the issues where mostly participants uh, tell you the deficiencies, or tell you the places where improvements could be made. So this is important. So we analyze the learner data and the feedback, and based upon that, we decide which are the things that we need to inculcate in the training, make changes in the training, or the training design or delivery of the training, or could there be something other than the training inputs? Maybe the training institution was not giving good facilities. It was too hot, and the traders could not concentrate in on learning. So non-training interventions also have to be listed. So the first thing is cataloging your training programs, then analyzing the learner data and feedback. Actually, learner data will also include the kinds of people, the age groups, the entry behavior. Entry behavior is the knowledge, skill, and attitude that they currently possess. and what is the gain in the knowledge and the skills and the attitude, whatever kind of training you are providing. So the comparison will help you analyze the learner data and also the feedback. Then evaluate employee performance. You have already learned a number of tools which tell you how to evaluate employee performance. And we have to keep in mind that to evaluate employee performance, we must give some time. We must give some time after the training has happened, say 6 months or so. Then assess opportunities for improvement. So, how can we improve it? What are the opportunities? Are we getting something readily available, or can we take help of other resources, or can we do we have some benchmark based upon which we can improve? So this assessment has to be made. Always tie the training programs to organizational goals. Actually, if you start with the organizational goal only and the training needs analysis is also matched with that, and the gaps in performance are identified, then it is much easier for you to tie the training programs to the organizational goals. So, if the training is aligned with the organizational goals, for example, the goal was increase in sales, or maybe reduction in customer complaints, then the training programs should be so built that these goals can be achieved. So, how do we catalog our training programs? First, what you need is to compile a list or comprehensive catalog of all the training programs you have developed to conduct a thorough audit, as well as all the training programs your learners can access via your learning systems and platforms. It could be online training, it could be a mobile app, or something like that. So, compile a list and make a comprehensive catalog. By comprehensive, I have already mentioned that you should have the number of people, the brief contents, the goal with which it is aligned, the organizational goal to which it will cater, to which it will satisfy. So, and try to take all the training programs you have developed, and then only you can conduct a thorough audit. So, and it should also include the online trainings or trainings through mobile or other platforms. So, when you have this list, a comprehensive catalog, then this list can be used, and it can be used for audit of each individual training program. Actually, what you will do here is you will try to make a benchmark kind of a thing, that these are the things that are there, and then whether my one training program, say it happened in January, was it up to the mark? The one that happened in April, was it up to the mark? Then the one that happened in, say, September, was it up to the mark? So this master list will help you to audit each individual training program to ensure that it's effective and up to date. Was the feedback from one training program lower than all the combined lists, or not, or is it better? So this will help you audit your training program, individual training programs. Now, how do we analyze learner data and feedback? As I said, you need a set of training programs. It is not just one program that will be helpful. So look at your learners data to see which programs they take the most and how well they do in each of those training programs. So their performance during the program, and also their feedback, how they did, how they thought about the program, and which is the most popular program. You can even have built-in questions like, would you recommend this training program to others or not? So you can get a response and see whether they say yes or no. Hmm? Or did they find it useful or only useful to some extent? So that can be analyzed. If most of your learners don't do well in a certain training program, that program may need to be revamped to suit their learning needs or preferences. Hmm? So it can be like changed, some more course material could be added, or some faculty could be changed, or change in the method of delivery could be there. So examples are, if learners seem to flock to a certain training program more than others, then find out why. Why do they do that? Why this training program is more popular than other training programs? Does it satisfy the learner's need to know, need to learn? Does it satisfy some things that they don't learn at the workplace and they want to fill up the gap in their knowledge? Hmm? So that is this is the kind of analysis that you have to make here. And why do they prefer some training programs? Is the program accessed via mobile apps when your other programs aren't? So that is another question that you can do. Nowadays, mobile apps are becoming more popular because they're more convenient. People can use them anywhere. Even if you're traveling by metro, you can use that. If you are far away somewhere, you don't have access to reading materials and things, then you can just use your mobile apps. You don't have access to computer, then you can use your mobile app and see the program. Then is it more interactive? Like, people try to participate in the program, they raise questions, they discuss things that are important to them. So is it more interactive? This is what you analyze. Such learner data will provide you with insight into which training programs are more effective with your learners. Hmm? So you can
Ma'am,
also conduct calls. Yes.
ma'am, may I ask a question?
Yeah, please do that, Anupam.
This this particular slide seems to be
Mhm.
taken towards the option where the learners have the option of selecting a training program and wanting to attend a training program. But is this the norm that is being followed across the industry or across the organizations? Because most places, organizations structure training according to what they feel is important. So it's not the option for the employee whether I want to go here or I don't want to go there. I have to go there if I'm detailed to do that. Only thing that can come up is what is at the end of the training program, how much have I learned, or what was my reaction to this entire training. Can you please elaborate on that, ma'am?
Anupam, there is one thing that you are missing here. Training audit is more or less an action that would be taken by the training institutions themselves who offer different trainings. Okay. And I think here the perspective is more from the training institutions side. They make available online their many training programs, like they publicize, they they advertise their different training programs, and people do pick and choose. Like your organization, maybe the HR department will pick and give the employees what they have chosen, or the employees may have a choice to apply. In larger organizations, for example, in the government itself, a number of training programs are circulated, and the employees have a choice to apply for them if they think they are attractive or they will learn something from them. So I don't think that it could be possible that in your organization it is only what is given that you have to take. For example, in the banks, If it is a technical training on the banking systems, or some kind of software, then definitely you cannot be a chooser. People will, the organization will give you what is there, and you have to do that. Okay, but there are many programs that are given. For example, international trainings, many Japanese programs come, you American programs come, or even in the in India, XLRI, Jamshedpur, or MDI Gurgaon, or even IIMs, they advertise their training programs, executive training programs. There you have this pick and choose. So for IIM Lucknow or IIM Ahmedabad, they will be like, it is better for them to conduct a training audit. Am I making sense, Anupam?
Right, ma'am. Then what you are saying is, if I have understood it correctly, it is this particular slide, and this training audit is from the percept of a training organization, which is in the business of providing training. It is not from the percept of a user organization. As I see, the training audit is a requirement of the user organization to see whether the training is being used well, or that limited training budget is being utilized well, and does it have any tangible benefits for the organization. For a training organization, a training audit is only to see which are the better subscribed courses, which can be tweaked better, because for them it is not it is a bread and butter issue in terms of sales. That is what the training organization is looking at. But for an other actual organization, it is more from the percept of the productivity and better performance. That is what I was saying. But I got your point, what you're saying, ma'am. Thank you very much.
I think I will add on to this. Yes, it is very important from the perspective of the training institution who sell their trainings, but it is equally important for the HR department of the organization who is sending their employees, because there will be a number of proposals floating with them, and over the years they have sent their employees to to certain trainings. And here again, even in the user organizations, employees have a choice which training to select, and the HR department can very well analyze what are the trainings that our employees mostly prefer going to. For example, if it is in management trainings, do they go in for strategic management? Do they go in for decision making? Do they go in for courses like team building and leadership? What kind of trainings do they prefer? So they would pick and choose because based upon that analysis. So even it is for the user organizations also, but here, like, it is more for the perspective of the training institution who sells the training is more prominent. For them, it is much more helpful. Am I making sense?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much.
Ma'am, I have one question. This is
Yeah,
Arvind.
please. Arvind, yeah.
Uh, when we actually start with the training, we have a pre-training evaluation, and then we actually verify with the post-training evaluation what was the benefit and what was the gap which was filled through the training intervention. I believe when we talk about pre-training evaluation, it is either the organization who is sending their employees for training, they do the pre-training evaluation because the data can come from the PMS or some sort of database which is maintained by the organization, or the pre-training evaluation might be conducted by the training company who is going to, it can be a third party because you can actually have external trainers, they can do the pre-training evaluation for the organization. Now, if let's say if I am a training organization and doing a training program for a company XYG, and in my pre-training and post-training evaluation, I said we have shown 30% growth, or this is the ROI, or this is because they actually want to tell good things about them. Idea of an audit should involve any third party rather than the training agency who is imparting the training to verify if whatever they are saying, is correct or not. I mean, this is what my understanding is of the audit programs.
Yeah, I
And
think
this,
I quite agree with you, because the bias will not be there. The third party would be more neutral
yes.
towards it.
So my guess is, it should be a third party either it can be from the organization itself, because they might actually want to verify what was the ROI, or it can be completely, a third party, not from the organization, not from the training agency, but an audit company.
It totally depends upon a number of factors. For example, how much budget you have. Like some companies will charge you a lot, and the HR department will be well equipped. They can do it. If they can do it, then there's no need to hire an external person
But
or
ma'am,
external.
but ma'am, my understanding is training audit, it has a lot of dependency on the initial data, that is the pre-program evaluation.
Definitely, it does have.
The pre-program evaluation is, let's say if the training company does the pre-program evaluation, so I will actually show, let's say if you are at a level 10, I'll show you that you are at a level 5. And even if you didn't do anything, I'll show that, the raise was like, 5. So how the audit will catch that? Because the idea of audit is to catch these, flaws.
It is actually, yeah, third party would be much more preferred method. And what generally happens, I think, is the training institutions or the companies who are selling the training, they make questionnaires or surveys and they give it to the organization from where the people would be coming. So the data is with them. So there's no chance, not much chance of swapping or much chance of showing the inflated figures. That could be done.
Right.
So it depends. It depends upon a number of factors how they.
Ma'am,
Yes.
ma'am, this is Ritu this side. Last time I recall, ma'am,
Yeah,
you
Ritu,
told
tell me.
about that. You told about that the evaluation is probably from the learner.
Ritu, your voice is not clear.
Okay.
Ritu, yeah, now, yeah, it's okay now. Yeah, tell me, Ritu.
Am I audible now?
Yes, yes.
Oh, that's great. Ma'am, I was just sharing the last time, if I recall, you were sharing about the evaluation or the feedback from the learner perspective.
Again, it seems you have gone away from the microphone.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
You
now it
please
is
carry
clear.
on. Okay.
Yeah. Last time, what happened? Last
Yeah.
time?
That these evaluations are probably from the learner's perspective, and learner only give it. So that is what I was thinking, that once the learner is from the organization, will the training come? Hello?
Ritu, when you said hello, it was clear, but when
No
you
issues, ma'am. Sorry, please carry on, ma'am. Coming between.
Ritu,
Yeah.
may I request you to type it out in the chat?
Yes,
Someone of
yes.
us, because your voice is just not clear.
Okay.
Ma'am, till Ritu types out her question, just a small comment on what Arvind had just said. Wherein a third party audit may be desirable, but in most instances it will not be practical because of the time and the budgetary constraints that you will have. It requires too much of effort and too much of money. Even in an organization as big as the armed forces, it becomes extremely difficult to do a external audit from a third party which is not involved in the conduct of the training. So most organizations will not have the budget and the time to do it, though the desirability cannot be discounted.
Yeah, you're right. that is a, like what you say, that is a constraint we have. So I think Ritu might have written her.
Ma'am, please carry on.
Ma'am, just to add what Anupam said, that the desirable is like getting training audit from external parties, but usually it is not a practice. Is it somewhere that is, does it mean that we do not value training as much as the finances? Because I have never seen financial audits being done by the training any organization themselves. Financial audits, they are usually
And it is very unfortunate, you're right, Arvind, that training mostly gets the least priority in our systems. And whenever there's a budgetary constraint, the training is the first thing that is to be like sacrificed.
I think even the financial audits, it is only done by the third party organization because it is a compliance thing. You can actually fuzz the data, and that's,
Yeah.
not going to go good for the government agencies for the tax thing. And that could be one reason why the third party, audit has to be done for financial data. Whereas, the same should have happened with the training data also, in order to make it more accurate and relevant.
Ma'am, Ritu has typed out her question.
Can you read it out? Because then I'll have
Yeah.
to switch over to the other.
I'll just read it out for you, ma'am.
Yeah.
As the training evaluation comes from learner's perspective of the organization, I was thinking that how can there be a bias in the pre-training? Fact remains fact of learner with training company.
Yeah, it depends, Ritu. Like people have different, what do you say, agendas, priorities. So even the image of the organization. So they may inflate figures. Even our government does that. So how can we stop anybody, any organization from doing it? There's a chance. There's a chance that people may be inflating or giving wrong figures just for their image or something. So, shall we move on from here?
Yes, ma'am.
So, we were here. So, these are the questions depending upon the, like your training. This is just an example. So, is the training interactive? Such learner data will provide you with insight into which training programs are more effective with your learners. You can also conduct polls and solicit learners' feedback directly to see which training programs they prefer and why. So this could be done either by the HR department or the training institution. So that is how it moves. So the other step is evaluating the employee performance. So we have to evaluate employee performance from data collected before learners engage in the training program, like Arvind was saying, and so that you can compare those data with the data collected after they engage in training programs. If a group of sales associates takes a sales training course, for example, then you want to make sure they become more effective salespeople after taking the training program. The sales performance should be better after they take the training course than it was before they took the course. Otherwise, the training course was not effective. So, such data has to be collected before the training and also after the training. Then we assess opportunities for improvement. So, here what we do is look for areas where you can implement new technologies or strategies to make those programs better. Usually, you can use learner data and feedback and employee performance data to discover new opportunities, as well as industry trends and research. So, and example is you might discover that your compliance training program can and should be conducted with virtual reality technology, or that you need more mobile apps for your onboarding training programs. So this might be revealed from the analysis. Scrap programs that don't work or incorporate newer technology into your training programs so that they can work better. So it's very important. Actually, weeding out, like in a garden, you can't live with weeds. Your garden wouldn't look good. Similarly, those training programs which are not working anymore, they should be scrapped. And then last was always tie training programs to organizational goals. So as you comb through each training program individually, make sure you tie each to an organizational goal. If it is not satisfying any organizational goal, then you need to scrap it. But like it will be very difficult for you to establish relationship with the organizational goal if it is a behavioral training. For example, team building and leadership. You cannot have a direct tie with organizational goal, but these the knowledge of these concepts do help people and motivational training also, it also helps. So behavioral training may not be, you may not be able to tie it to an organizational goal directly, but overall it may be akin to all the organizational goals you have. If your programs aren't tied to an organizational goal, they will not be effective or yield a high return on investment. So that is there. So I was talking about the training audit, and let us go on to something else which is also very important for you. So I'll share another PowerPoint now, and we will talk about something which is
May I ask something? I
yes,
joined.
please.
I joined a few minutes late. You were showing the SWOT at that point in time. What was that pertaining to?
SWOT analysis, that is a very important tool, and
Even ma'am, I missed unfortunately today. I just again joined and sought. So if you can just
okay,
brief what
I'll
was
just
few
take a
slides.
few minutes to talk about that. Okay, and I will just see SWOT analysis. Yeah, this is the one.
Ma'am, how many slides were before that?
How many slides?
Before that, SWOT.
I
Because
think
I
it has
also
17 slides, but it's not like much material. The
okay.
slides, the things are, you can just quickly have a look at the
Oh, that's great.
SWOT analysis. And yeah, it's the same training. We were discussing training audit and we talked about SWOT analysis. So we just talked what is SWOT. This is strengths, weaknesses, and opportunities and threats. And there's a very thin line between strengths and opportunities. Opportunities are mostly futuristic. You can conduct SWOT on almost anything. You can conduct a SWOT on a proposal for training that has come your way. You can conduct a SWOT on your own organization. You can conduct a SWOT on yourself also, or some aspect that you are looking at closely. You can conduct a SWOT on your life. You can conduct a SWOT on your current career prospects. So this is the most versatile tool and you can use it very well for evaluation also. So in any training program, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses, what are the opportunities, what are the threats? For example, you're going in for, I used one example also. When you do the SWOT analysis, you list out a issue here and you list out the strengths and weaknesses inherent in that and the opportunities it might bring and the threats it might invite, or there may be threats to your proposal. So this is an example, the creation of own distributor company. Some company wants to make their own distributor company. Currently, they may be depending upon other distributors to access new end user sectors, not currently being developed. So the strengths are listed on the left side. For example, they have customer lists, they have direct delivery capability, they have better product life and durability, they have right products, quality and reliability, and so on. And on the right side, you can just write down the opportunities. Like if they have this capability, in future they could develop new products. They can have, local competitors may have poorer products. Profit margins may be good. So these are the opportunities that may be coming along with it. And it can surprise competitors also. Similarly, they would have some weaknesses also for the same issue. The weaknesses could be like customer lists. Do they have very strong customer list, but it is not tested? They could be a small player in the big market. They don't have direct marketing experience. They need more salespeople. They have limited budget. They don't have a detailed plan yet. So these are inherent. The weaknesses and strengths are inherent in the company or the issue itself. And The threats are futuristic or which could be outside the proposal. For example, legislation could impact it. Environmental effects would favor larger competitors. There is a threat like that. Their market demand may be seasonal. People may buy the product only in winters. Retention of key staff is critical. Like you have trained people, but as soon as they get an opportunity in other companies, they may leave you. They may leave the company, and whatever efforts you put in, whatever expenditure you put in the people, that would go waste. There could be a possible negative publicity. It could be vulnerable to reactive attack by major competitors. So these are the things.
Thank you very much, ma'am, for recapping. Thanks a lot.
So shall we move on to the other topic now? Okay. So, okay, I will share another. So let us do some stakeholder analysis. And that is also there in your course. Then we will try to develop an evaluation of training system. So stakeholder analysis is also a very powerful tool, because stakeholders are people who are gaining or losing, or they have some stake in your evaluation. So for an evaluator, it is important to do an analysis of who are the stakeholders. So the purpose of this stakeholder analysis is to view success or failure of training from a variety of perspectives. So as an evaluator, you may be placed either with the organization itself, or you may be in the training institution, or maybe you are a freelance evaluator. So if you're a freelance evaluator, you will be looking at it from a micro level. But actually, you're required to look at the training or the evaluation from a variety of perspectives. So what you do is you list out the stakeholders. And another purpose is to consider whether stakeholders' views are positive, negative, or simply indifferent. Then what effect will these views have on decision making? If you suggest some improvements, then will the company decide to do that? Exploring the views of stakeholders can have a significant impact on evaluation. And people who have positive views of evaluation of training are likely to become proactive allies, whereas the views of others may limit what can be achieved through evaluation of training and what methods can be used. So it is important to do a stakeholder analysis. Now, what does it include? First of all, you have to identify who are the stakeholders involved. That is simply making a list of stakeholders. Then list out the evaluation of training issues that we wish to address. The issues could be like there's a problem in the design, or there's a problem in giving the feedback, or maybe for the training institution, you need some more equipment. That could be an issue. There could be different kinds of issues. Then establishing the views of stakeholders towards evaluation of training initiatives. And the next thing is mapping the power of a stakeholder to take action against the dynamism or predictability of their willingness to use that power. For example, senior management. Their one signature or one nod may open up gates for you. But if they are not in line with your views, then it could be a different. How much they can use their power. Like here we do an analysis of whose approval is required and who will be taking action. Things like that. Mapping the power of a stakeholder to take action against the interest they have to do. So the first thing is identifying the stakeholders. So stakeholders involved in a training program can be internal or external. The participants, trainers, managers of the participants, those who designed the program, those who are funding the program, managers of the training institutions, departments employing the staff. These could be potential stakeholders. Now, this slide is showing you a plan. Like you can plan an evaluation of training intervention based upon where and for what purpose you want to do the evaluation. For example, if you want to do it at a full training thing, then you have to do at these areas A, B, C, D. So you will be requiring different tools to use before the training if you are here, and during the training and after the training, and when some time has passed and people are using the training and a number of training programs have happened. So depending upon this, the stakeholders will change. For example, here at this area, the stakeholders would be the senior management, the people who have funded such trainings, a number of programs. They will be interested only in an overview. They would be interested only in results. And if you are here at A, the stakeholders would be very different. Mostly the trainer and the participant. These will be the stakeholders. So at every stage, the stakeholders will change. Like, of course, there will be overlapping at places, but depending upon where you are doing it, your stakeholders list will change. So while identifying the stakeholders, some of these will be easily accessible to the evaluation of training team and others difficult to reach, to gain their views or to seek information from them for EOT. They may be senior managers and senior management who are difficult to catch, who are not available mostly. That could be the reason. Stakeholders can be treated as individuals or groups. So you can make a group of people also as one stakeholder. If there are large number of stakeholders, it may be preferable to treat some as groups and only identify individuals in the analysis when they have high importance for the particular initiative. Okay. So next thing is to identify the key issues or evaluation of training issues. The issues to be addressed through an evaluation of training need to be identified. What is the thing? For example, there is a performance is not up to the mark. That could be an evaluation of training issue, or some new equipment needs to be procured. That could be an evaluation of training issue. There's a problem in the design. That could be an evaluation of training issue. Maybe the people who have undergone training, they have some summative assessment. They've passed the training, but they're not told. They're not given proper feedback where they did well or where they did not do well. So that could be an evaluation of training issue also. So depending upon the kind of thing that you are looking at, you have to identify the evaluation of training issue, the key issue in that. Now, this may depend on the level at which you are working or developing your EOT initiatives. I showed you a slide. So depending upon that, the place you're working, your evaluation of training issue may be different. So based upon the place, the area where you are working.
Ma'am, can you just explain that graph once again, please?
The slide, the area slide, this?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
Ma'am, just one question before that, if you can allow, ma'am. Levels means pre-training, post-training, and the between training, during training. Is it correct, ma'am? I'm understanding.
Yeah, A area is the place Actually, the participant will not start with zero knowledge and skill. He already has some knowledge and skill that we presume. Okay, by past experience, he might have picked up something. So before the training, he has certain knowledge, existing knowledge and skills. At this stage, when you do your evaluation, your uh, stakeholders would be, I think, the participant, the training institute, the trainer, or maybe immediately the line managers if they're interested. And during the training, I think the people, the stakeholders would be only the learner and the trainer. And at C, when he's leaving and he's entering back into the organization, that is the post course. This is the training course. The square is depicting a training course, and this stage is when he's just entering the training course. This stage is when during the training course. So at this level, probably only the trainer and the learner are involved. They are the stakeholders. Here, more people become involved: the line managers, the trainer, the training managers, the participant. Hmm, And here, transfer of learning is happening. So a number of issues would be there. And again, after some time, when he's performing only in the organization, these people here would take a back seat. Here, the individual employee, the senior management, the line managers, the people who are funding the training, they will be the most prominent stakeholders here. Even society becomes here. The customer base becomes stakeholder here. So that is what the slide tries to say.
Ma'am, the slide is understandable. But the only issue was in x-axis where you have put the resources out here. Should it be time or it be the resources?
The resources include time, faculty, money, funds, uh, duration of the training,
Because none
etc.
of these things,
The
none
training
of these
facilities,
impacting
etc.
out here. I agreed, but none of these things are actually impacting out here in the post-course part of it.
Actually, the learning curve that
Time
I'm
is cost.
showing you here, the learning curve that I'm showing you here is like, how do you evaluate? In evaluation, there are two. If you have attended one lecture in which I try to show you performance versus resources, these are the two parameters on the basis of which we test the effectiveness or efficiency of our training. If you remember, that must have been in my
Absolutely.
first or the second lecture.
Yes, ma'am.
Huh? And resources, people are connected with the resources. If you have a
Right.
photocopier, you have to get the material photocopied. Then there will be people involved in that. They also become stakeholders. If there are more trainings happening, then they have a stake. If there are less trainings happening, then they will suffer. People who are involved in transportation, people who, like, the cost itself is a resource. Cost, time, and duration of the course, the faculty, these are the resources. Shall we
Understood.
move? Shall we move on?
Yes, ma'am.
So we identify the key issues, and they will be differing at different places. Now, stakeholders' views, they could be supportive. They could be seeing the benefits of evaluation of training and giving whatever help is required. So they may be very enthusiastic about evaluation of training, and they wanted to know that what happens, and they want to help the evaluator. So these people will be the people on whom you will depend, from whom you can draw the maximum energy and knowledge and data. They could be neutral also, perhaps also indifferent to EOT, because they don't realize what would happen. They are neither helping nor hindering your evaluation. They are saying that you do your work and it does not matter to me. But these are the people potentially whom you can bring to your side, make them positive. There could be opposing people. They may be seeing evaluation of training as a threat. For example, some trainer may be apprehensive about it. Or some people in the organization, they may think that this might bring bad name to the organization. The HR department, some people in the HR department, they may not be very helpful. They may be opposing. What is the need? Why should we do it? Why should we spend extra money to do this? Or why should we spend time on that? So people could be opposing also. People could be uncertain. They're unsure whether to agree or not to agree. And these are the people who are sitting on the fence. So they may, if you are active and you take care of them, they may come to your side. If you're able to show them the results, like show them the possible results, then they could be with you or they may join the opposing team. So this is how we do the analysis. Let us look at it with one example of how to map the views. So mapping of stakeholder views. Now I have made a key, like we list out the stakeholders and list out the key issues. And then we write plus for the people who are supporting, 0 for neutral, minus for opposing, and question mark for uncertainty. That is immaterial, like you can use your own code system also. It is just to make it easier to indicate. You can write support, neutral, oppose, uncertain also. So internal stakeholders would be like trainer, designer, management of training institute. They are the internal here. And the external would be participants, staff in organization. So perspective here is the training institution. So the key issues, what do we do is we write down the issues, key issues or changes on the left side. And the stakeholders here, these are the names, these are assumptions. I've just given random names to them, V, W, X, Y, Z. Okay, these are the internal people and these are the external people. So the issue is revise the immediate reaction questionnaire. Immediate reaction questionnaire is an instrument through which we collect data feedback after the training is over. Just before they leave the training institution, the participants fill up the immediate reaction questionnaire. So the internal could be positive about it or negative. The trainer could be negative about it. Training management could be negative about it, but opposing it, or external could be supporting it. So introduce product or process checklist. So some people are positive, supportive, some people are neutral. Redesign objective test items. Again, people could be supporting or participant could be uncertain, unsure, for example, whether I want it or not. Or line manager could be neutral. He doesn't care about it. He's his he cares only about performance, enhancement in performance. So introducing learning logs, involving managers in evaluation. These are the things that could be the issues. And so here we list out their reactions or their likely view of the stakeholders. So there was a case, but I'm not doing it with you because I don't think I will be able to finish it. I did it in the last classes, the last season, but that is only supplementary. Like it's not in your course and it's not necessary that you do it. So the next step when we do in stakeholder analysis is after listing out the stakeholders and their views, we map the power dynamism. Now this analysis uses another metrics to examine the power individual stakeholders have against the likelihood of them using it. Huh? And one axis looks at their power, which could be direct. They have seniority or status or control the budget, or indirect due to their position within their organization. Some people are hierarchically, they don't have much power, but the people, they have leadership qualities and people confide in them. listen to them, and the general current of the organization is run by them. In their organization, they control and they give access to information or provide influencing. If they say that nobody will tell this thing to the evaluator, then nobody will dare do that, because some dynamism is occurring in the organization. So on one axis we look at the power, and on the other axis estimate their predictability to use their power. So there could be high power or low power. This is the axis with power, and the predictability of using this power is on the x-axis. It could be low or high. Just look at high here, because my PowerPoint has shifted it here. I don't know why. Some formatting has happened. So high is here. So like if the power is high and predictability is low, then you are not certain what will happen. It could be the greatest danger or it could be greatest opportunity. They may be very much with you or they may be very much not supporting you. And if the power is high and predictability is high, then you know this person is going to help me and he's very powerful. If he says, if he decides, then he is there. So you're able to predict. And if it is low, then power is low and predictability is low, then unpredictable but manageable. Like it doesn't matter much if he's not supporting. But if it is low power but high predictability, and you know that he's going to create problem or not create any problems, then there are a few problems, like not much problem. So they may be applied to each stakeholder in turn to provide a profile of those we need to consider carefully and those who can be expected to not present any challenges. So you do that power dynamism, and this may be applied to each stakeholder in turn to provide a profile of those we need to consider carefully and those who can be expected to not present any challenges. So far, stakeholder V, we may read them as B. The one I showed you in the earlier slide that was there. Here you can see the slide again. This is V. For these issues, he's being positive and neutral for this, positive for this, and so on. So you can just list it out based upon their thing. So for stakeholder V, we may rate them as B. So B falls in this category. Unpredictable but manageable. It depends upon the person. So you can rate them as you see them after interviewing them or taking a survey. Then the stakeholders who need to be treated most carefully are X and Y. X is, we have rated them as B, and Y we have rated them as D. So this is D, greatest danger or opportunity, because he has high power and predictability is low, or somebody who has been rated as B. So you have to see that this is how the tool is used. Then we use this tool to map power or the interest. Actually, in reality, I haven't seen any organizations using it. They do list out the stakeholders, they do list out the issues that are there, and they just take their views and that's it. So even if you use it only up to here in this slide, that is good enough. If you are able to do this, stakeholders, listing the stakeholders and changes in issues, and so that you get an idea. So mostly people do not do the power mapping. So even if you are able to do that, then that is enough. Now, mapping power or interest is something like this, that this is a development of the power dynamism matrix and attempts to clarify a stakeholders' attitude on two axes: the power they hold and the extent to which they are likely to show interest in proposed EOT initiatives. So if he has high power and low level of interest, then you have to work hard to keep him satisfied. If he has high power and high interest, then they are the key players. For them, you have to use them and show them at every step. You have to consult them at every step. Then if they have low power and low interest, then they won't make any effort. Like they wouldn't, whatever you do, they may not care. But if they have low power but they have high interest, then must keep them informed so that they give you support. So that is how we map this. And so this may be applied to each stakeholder in turn to provide a profile of those we need to consider carefully and those who can be expected to not present any challenges. So again, in the first analysis, we did their positivity, opposing, and neutral uncertainty analysis. Based upon that, you can rate them as PQSR as in the earlier slide. So this was the chart that we made. And so what you do is, looking at introduced product or process checklist from the matrix, it shows 3 stakeholders willing to support that issue, one who may oppose it and one who is neutral. To maximize the positive, minimize the negative. Who are the stakeholders likely to have influence on the EOT initiative? Are some more important than the others? Which of them should be included in the matrix? These are the questions you have to ask, and while making your list of stakeholders. So which issues within the EOT process are likely to present problems? This is also you have to consider. How do you make decisions about the stakeholder's attitude? Try to base your judgment by talking to the person. Naturally, by interview only, you will be able to make decisions about his attitude. And you can also talk to peers. Or if you have documentary evidence, if he has some papers in which he has said that he is not supporting the evaluation, then that will give you the evidence. So how are you going to take this information forward? These are the things that the evaluator has to think about. What strategy will you employ to convince the doubters? What strategy will you employ to convince the doubters? Then how can you use the positive attitudes of some stakeholders? A tactic could be to gather a network of like-minded people as your allies who will support you and who may help to shift opinions. The negatives can be converted into positives. Stakeholders who are neutral probably need less attention, although you should keep them informed. Perhaps by becoming involved in discussing issues, they will develop a more positive attitude. So an evaluator has to do this. So this is how we use the this tool of stakeholder analysis. And I think I'll leave this slide will be there with you. You can just go through it. And shall we quickly do some steps in making a EOT report? And I think that would be helpful to you. So we'll go on to that. I'll just share something on EOT report. I think there is something called
Ma'am, for all these things which you have taught, ma'am, do you would you like to suggest some reading material, because I really see there are a lot of things to be learned of, or the books are good enough?
I think they're good enough for the purpose of the paper. They are good enough because I think like you have the basic knowledge, and if you have the understanding, then you will be able to handle any questions.
Okay.
Otherwise, like you can read the book by Donald Kirkpatrick. That is a comprehensive
Okay.
guide.
Okay.
So let us do the EOT report because you have to make a EOT report also. And then after that, in 5 minutes, do you want me to do the mean, median, mode thing also? That is actually statistical things which can be like, I don't think you need any inputs on that. Okay, let's do first this, then we'll see.
I recall, ma'am, there was something in the assignment regarding the statistical techniques which you would
You have
be.
mean, medium, and mode in your.
Yeah. Maybe you can bit, ma'am, explain a bit how it is being applied, like things.
Okay. Okay, let's quickly do the. I think the report is not there in your course. Is there? EOT report. Instead of this, shall we do the mean, median, and mode thing? Yeah, I think that would be better. I will leave these slides. They are comprehensive and you can do it yourself. Okay. So, just a moment. I will just stop sharing.
Ma'am, report writing is there in the course.
Okay. Okay, then we'll do both of them. Okay.
Okay, ma'am.
Since I've opened this one now, let us quickly go through this. Mean, median, and mode. This is in your course. Mean is actually something which has a position. If you have data, then the mean is the position, quality, or condition which is midway between extremes. And a number that typifies a set of numbers, such as a geometric mean or an arithmetic mean. The average value of a set of numbers that can also be said as mean. Okay. It is easy to calculate. What you do is you add up all the numbers and then divide by how many numbers there are. That is the count. Okay. For example, you have 7, 11, 22, 30. So you add up all the 4 numbers and divide it by 4. So then you get the mean. It is the sum divided by the count. So it's very easy to find out. And this is the example. 6, 11, 7. You add that, it is 24, and divide by how many numbers? There are 3 numbers, 6, 11, and 7. So you get a mean. That is the mean is 8. Now we have these numbers: 3, 7, 5, 13, 20, 23, 39, 23, 40, 23, and so on. The sum of these numbers is 330. Now there are 15 numbers. The mean is equal to 22 now. So 22 is the mean of the above numbers. And here, if you have 3 minus 7, 5, 13, so you add up and you get 12. And there are 5 numbers, so mean would be 2.5. So that is how we calculate the mean. Median is the middle value of a sorted list. Please pay attention to something which is sorted list, like they are arranged in a way. So to find the median, place the numbers in value order and find the middle point. So find the mean of 12, 3, and 5. So we have to first put them in order. It could be ascending or descending order. So I have put it in ascending order, 3, 5, 12, and then the middle is 5. Actually, the middle does not give you so much indication. Like it is more near the 3 than more 12. But median is there, and median is also used in statistics, in data. For example, you have these numbers here. When we put those numbers in order, we will put them in ascending or descending order. So here it is the ascending order. So the middle value will give you the median. There are 50 numbers. Our middle number is the 8th number. The 8th number here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2,
23, I
3,
guess.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 23 is the median. So 23 will be the median. Although we have 4 23s here, but 23 is falling in between. So that is why. It doesn't matter that some numbers are the same in the list. Now that was easier with the odd number thing. We had odd number of count, but here could be even number of counts also. Now what we will do, we will find the middle pair here and then find the value that is halfway between them. This is easily done by adding them together and dividing by 2. So when we put these numbers in order, we have put them in ascending order, and there are now 14 numbers. And so we don't have just one middle number, we have a pair of middle numbers. The middle numbers are 21 and 23. So what we do is we add them and divide it by 2. So our mean here will be 22. So 21 plus 23 is 44. So 44 divided by 2 is 22. Now, we didn't have this number in the list. 22 was not figuring in the list. But that is okay because half the numbers in the list are less and half the numbers are greater. So this actually gives you a skewed view. But it is all right. Like if you are asked to find a median, that is how you find the median. Now the other thing is mode or modal value. The mode is simply the number which appears most often. Like in counts, if you count them, then the number which is appearing most often is the mode. So in 6, 3, 9, 6, 6, 5, 9, 3, 6 is appearing 3 times most often. So we have the mode as 6. To find the mode or modal value, it is best to put the numbers in order. Then count how many of each number. A number that appears most often is the mode. So in this example, you can see the numbers here. Now what we do is we put them in order, in ascending order. So 23 is occurring 4 times. None of the numbers is occurring 4 times. So mode is 23. This is another example, 19, 8, 29, 35, 19, 28, 15. And again we arrange it. So 19 is appearing maximum times. The mode is 19. Yes, Benita, do you want to ask something?
Yes, so ma'am, when we get this question, like this was asked last time, na, mean, median, and mode, but this is a training evaluation paper. What we are seeing, this is pure statistical. So if we are writing this for a training evaluation, do we have to go just statistically, or we have to, I don't know, link this with training? And how does this get linked with training?
Actually, as an evaluator, you will be lending with a lot of data. For example, you have taken feedbacks and you have given some quantification to the reactions that people give. So you will, and if you have 1,000 reactions for each issue, then you will have to find the mean or the mode or the median from that. And regarding the paper, I saw your last two semesters papers, In that, they ask you only a short note on these things. They don't really give you the data and ask you to take it out. So if you know it, then you can just write down some theoretical, like some content on that, and that's it.
Okay, so just this statistical application is what we are supposed to write even in the paper if we are asked.
Yes, I think so.
Okay, thank you, ma'am.
So now, what is the difference? Like what mean versus median? This is a comparison. The main disadvantage of using the mean to describe a group of numbers is that extremely small and large values can skew the result. For example, the mean of the numbers 4556 is 4556 and 40 is the sum of the numbers 60 divided by 5. The resulting mean is 12. A value that doesn't really reflect the majority of values in the group. This is because the number 40 is skewing the mean. So this is important to know. Actually, this is a high extreme. 40 is a high extreme in all these numbers. And it is skewing them. If you take out the mean, it will skew. Compare this to the median, which is the middle number in the group, and the middle number is 5, which reflects a closer value, isn't it? The value 5 is closer representation of most of the numbers in the group. Of course, not of 40, but most of the numbers. So that is the difference, and median sometimes is much better than the mean. So what do we need to do is take out an appropriate measure. Each measure may not apply to any situation. If you wish to find the average grade on a test for your class, but one student fell asleep and scored a 0, the mean would show a much lower average because of one low grade, while the median would show how the middle group of students scored. Using these measures in everyday life involves not only understanding the differences between them, but also which one is appropriate for a given situation. So we have to be careful. So the best way is to use all the three. Mean, median, and mode reveal different aspects of your data. Any one will give you a general idea, but may mislead you. Having all three will give you a more complete picture. For example, for the data 5, 7, 6, 127, you get a mean of 36.25. And a number that fits the arithmetic but seems a little out of place. The median 6.5 may have more relevance to the series, but says nothing about the outlier. Since the series has no repeated numbers, it has no mode. This also reveals valuable information about your data. So the mode here is 0, but median is 6.5. Example. This is an example where it is used. The Bureau of Labor Statistics defines the median wage as the 50th percentile wage estimate. 50% of workers earn less than the median, and 50% of workers more than the median. It is the center of a range of numbers, though not necessarily equally distant from the top and bottom numbers. It is one way statisticians define the center of a set of data using a number. Other measures used for this are known as the mean and mode. A median salary shows exactly what a person precisely in the middle of all the workers in an occupation would earn, because it isn't affected by outliers. A value in a set of data so different from other numbers that its existence can't be expected based on chance, in the same way that the mean or average can be. For example, in a group of 5 workers who earn $100, $1,000, $10,000, $100,000, and $1,000, the mean or average salary of these workers would be $222, $220, while the median salary would be 10,000. You can see 10,000 is the middle number. In such an extreme case, the median is a much better indicator of a typical mid-range salary than the mean. So taking out the mean here is useless actually, and we should depend upon the median because that is much more indicator. 50% are getting more and 50% getting less. So this was median, mode, and thing. Let us go on to the, I'll take just 5 minutes more and let us do the EOT report also. Agreed? So let us do that. So there is some importance attached to the report. It can be a part of the terms of reference. When you take the assignment of evaluation of training, you will be required to submit a report that may be the term. It contains information and recommendations that are needed for decision making, and you can document your findings. Your reports should be formal. Official documents, they are usually written using formal language. So that is how you should present your reports. Now you have to describe. First thing is description. You should use a style that is well structured and simple to read. A lack of jargon and using familiar vocabulary will help readers' understanding. Be tactful when describing problems and their causes because you need people's active, willing participation, not indifference and resentment. And in fact, you should be careful. You should not be offending people. Even if you have to say negative things, say it in a positive way. Help people to feel a sense of ownership of your findings. Actually, if you cite their what they said, cite what their names also, then it will be like people take more ownership of your findings and recommendations by including references and contributions by stakeholders, members of staff, beneficiaries, customers, etc. Include examples likely to be of interest to your readers and use analogies to illustrate what might be a complex and sensitive situation. So this is the general way we should go about writing the report. Your style should be neither subservient when dealing with senior people nor patronizing or authoritarian to others, subordinate to you. So you should be like neutral and formal. Use positive, objective, and direct recommendations based on substantive findings. Each recommendation should be a basis for action that is acceptable, practical, realistic, and motivating to all concerned. Please check the grammar. Initially submit a draft report. And if the stakeholders are agreeing to that, only then you should submit the full report, the final report. This will enable you to allow for their views when carrying out a final edit. So there is a format that I have suggested. It is not the format. You can use any other format, but generally such format looks good. So you can have a title page, clearly state the subject of the report, also references to stakeholders, associated client organizations, authors, and date. Then you can have a contents page, list headings, subheadings, and appendices. Then summary of recommendations. It is a very good thing to write a summary of recommendations because mostly at higher levels, people don't want to read the whole report. So if you have given a summary of what you recommend in the beginning only, then they would be like, it would be much more helpful to them. So refer to numbered paragraphs in the text. When you are giving your recommendations, where in the text you have stated that your detail, given the detail, that should be referred to. Give particular emphasis to recommendations where these are described in detail. Then you must write whatever abbreviations that you use or explain some jargon or terms that you have used. For example, entry behavior. You must write about that. Or if you are talking about some stakeholder analysis or something, some tool, then you must explain those terms. So inevitably, the report will include terms, abbreviations, and jargon unfamiliar to some readers. So list these with a brief explanation. Then start with the introduction. The purpose of an introduction is to describe the report, you should write that. It may be appropriate to outline how information was gathered and what limitations, if any, were imposed. So, how the way you took the information, whether you used questionnaires, whether you used a survey, whether you used interviews, this should be indicated. And if there were any limitations, then you must be able to write that down. Then write a forward. For some reports, a forward written by a senior person can add authority. So, and support to findings and recommendations. So, you can ask your director or some person in higher level to sign your forward. Avoid including irrelevancies that may distract readers' attention. And acknowledgements, record the names and designation of the people involved. Particular reference should be given to stakeholders, followed by others who have helped in writing this or who have helped in your evaluation of training exercise. Then you should list out the terms of reference that were given to you. These should be stated as agreed with the stakeholders, whose names and designations should be included. Note any changes made during the assignment. If there were any changes in the terms of reference, then that should also be given. Then comes the main text. This is the most important part of the report. Organize in an accessible way, easy to reach way, like people are able to put their hand on the desired place. It should be well presented and easy to read. Use main headings and subheadings to highlight significant features or chapters of the text. Link headings, subheadings to specific performance issues, functions, working groups, or stakeholders. People may only read those parts of the report which are directly relevant to them. Explain the process you have used along with your findings, conclusions, and recommendations. Describe significant issues to which you wish to draw attention rather than the tools you have used. Include details of tools in appendices. Then you must have an executive summary after the main text of 1 or 1.5 page. It should not be very big. Sometimes people just skip the things and go to the executive summary, which gives a highlight of everything. So it should be a 1.5 page and done after the main section has been compiled and not before that. So that is how we write the report. Then in the appendices, also known as attachments, annexures, or exhibits, you can put things. They allow you to cater for a variety of readers. Keep the main text as concise as possible, with details presented separately where they will not interfere with the main flow of the report. Appendices can include completed EOT tools, data, and information obtained from interviews, questionnaires, etc. You can put that. Appendices can be referred to see as Appendix A, or details are shown in Appendix B. Use cross-referencing also. Where you write Appendix A, you can write the para number below it in brackets. Para number of the place where you have talked about the Appendix A or talked about the Appendix B. Normally, appendices are designed by letter rather than numbers. You don't write Appendix 1, Appendix 2. Generally, we write Appendix A, Appendix B, Appendix C. And annexures are Annexure 1, Annexure 2, Annexure 3, or so on. So that is how we write the report. Then numbering. Cross-referencing is an advantage. A standard number notation should be used. Like wherever you are using a number, use the same standard. If it is Roman, then write Roman, or if it is Arabic numerals, then write Arabic numerals. The most common system is paragraph numbering. So it is very good to number your paragraphs also. Each paragraph has a sequential number starting with 1 and carrying on through the text. You can have 1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, and so on. The advantage of this system is that any paragraph can easily be identified and located, and thus discussed at meetings or by telephone or emailed. Numbering is best done after the main text is written and a summary of the recommendations is drafted. So you should put the numbers at the last. So that is all I wanted to talk about today. And thank you very much and all the best to you for your examinations. So if you have any questions, you're welcome.
Ma'am, this was the last session for this particular paper?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you very much, ma'am.
Thank you,
Welcome.
ma'am.
Okay, the PowerPoints are, I think, already available on the website. The link is already given, I think. So you can go through that and you can prepare. Okay. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, ma'am. Can you please repeat where I'll find your PPT?
I don't know the exact link. I think the ISG people, Mr. Arun, will be able to put it. He puts it every time. I see in the chat, he does that.
No, that
So-
is the feedback form.
Only the feedback form. Is that so?
Mr. Arun, can we ask you now when, can you help me here?
Yeah, Manager ji. Hello. Yes, ma'am. Yes, please.
Arun, please give them all the PowerPoints. They are already with you. Last time they were put on the, I'm using the same ones.
Okay.
You share the,
So, right, ma'am. Just please share the PPTs on my mail ID. Thereafter, I will forward me all the participants to join over there. Right.
you don't have the last time's PPTs. These are the same ones. All of them are the same.
Okay,
Sure, ma'am. Right.
thanks.
Yeah.